On the 6th of March 1957, Ghana became the first African state south of the Sahara to gain freedom from colonial rule. But what does freedom really mean? Meet Ambrose, a young man who drives for a living. He feels his community has been neglected and is on the constant lookout for a better opportunity to change his economic fortunes.
This is Keta. I come from this community. The main problem we face as young people is unemployment. Most of us completed various levels of education, some even tertiary graduates, but the jobs are not just available. Politicians only make big promises during elections to create job opportunities for the youth when voted into office, but always fail to fulfill their promise. In this community, the main occupation we inherited from our forebears is artisanal fishing, and it is what you will find most of us engaged in as a source of livelihood. The other popular occupation you will find is driving. This is where I find myself at the moment. And we all know how hard Ghana's economy is. After the car owner gets his share from the day's work, I am not left with much to live on. Out of frustration, some youths head out of the country in search of jobs and even try illegal migration. We don't even hear from them again whether they are alive or not. It is quite frustrating not to have job opportunities, and some of us have no other hope but also have to try our luck. The few entrepreneurs in Keta only put up hotels and pubs, but how many people can these facilities employ? We do a lot of vegetable farming and fishing in this community. Investors could look into building food processing factories instead. I think this will rather create better job opportunities.
Lack of opportunities back home is the main reason why young people lose their lives at sea, attempting illegal migration.
Don't know what the future holds for us as young people in this country. Getting a job in this country is just difficult. So you can't survive on your own. You might think you've completed school, that maybe at the end of the day you provide for yourself, but still you have to depend on your parents.
My experience in community development has revealed the fact that rural communities are not tapped into. The resources in those communities are not tapped into. Development is mostly centered in the urban centers. So we have just the traditional ways of income generation. We have the farming and the fishing in the rural areas. Young people complete school and have nothing to do and are compelled to move out from their communities to the urban centers. The development sector has realized that the local resources like farming, if improved, will engage a lot of young people. For instance, supplying machinery like the tractors and having modern ways of farming in the rural areas will help a lot to keep the young people. Because with these, they have less energy to spend on the farming and get enough money than just using the traditional way, cattle and the hoe. We also think the fishing can also be improved by educating them on modern ways of fishing, supplying them with boats and stuff. So in general, the rural communities, to my understanding, have been ignored by the central government because development is centered in Accra, Kumasi, and stuff, and then the rural areas are ignored, and the youth are compelled to move out. So we are appealing to government and other stakeholders to turn their attention to the rural areas and engage the communities in what they think they can do to develop themselves. Most of the times, they do this kind of a top-down approach, bringing development from the urban centers or from the capital cities onto the rural areas without really doing the need assessment to see what the communities needs that will be tailor-made to their income generation. So we think this has been failing a lot, and we think that stakeholders should look into that and engage the communities in their small own way and develop them to develop themselves. So I think when these things are done, we'll be able to retain our youth in the rural areas and have our development and everybody happily living.
Politics plays a huge role in how resources are distributed in every state. Unfortunately, here you would find a ruling class of politicians who are out of touch with the masses and see political power as entitlement, often used for personal advancement. The rich getting richer at the expense of the poor. Politics can be expensive, and these politicians recoup money spent on winning elections with profits, often robbing the state through corrupt dealings. These countries are usually transacted between the African political elites and the foreign elites unfavorably. Looking beyond is the African child, whose birthrights, hopes, and aspirations are being denied, and his right to self-determination.
So you see the young man in the television, in the video, who was very passionate to travel outside because he feels there will be greener pastures. Perhaps those countries have organized themselves well, and there are jobs and young people want to move out there. So when these things are done in the country, I think it will keep a lot of young people back to work in their own communities. Because one area also is politics, where politics is reserved for rich people. You have to donate a lot of money to become somebody, and young people who just finished school and are passionate to do politics do not have money, and all they need to do is to ride on the back of somebody who ends up dictating to them. So you see these political parties and their supporters, I mean, passionate to stand against, being passionate to stand against the government will not happen, because I mean they are being supported by the rich men here and there. So I think a lot of factors are contributing to lack of opportunities for young people in the country. So the government should come down to the rural areas, tap the resources there, develop them, create opportunities for young people, and also give them the opportunities to get into wherever they want to go to in politics, rather than having to involve money in all that we do.
Africa's current state is as a result of not only internal factors, but the external as well. By this, I mean centuries of exploitation. Diversity, which is considered strength, became Africa's curse. Since different cultures of Africa at the time saw themselves as separate units, conflicts were usually fought between these cultures, so to get the war captives sold as slaves for the New World plantation labor. This took a life of its own and became uncontrollable. Entire communities were wiped off because the smaller states couldn't defend themselves against the bigger rivals. Attack became a mode of defense for some of the other smaller states too, who began attacking other weaker communities for European weapons to defend themselves. Unfortunately, humans became currency for European goods in Africa. In that age, manpower was immense capital, and able bodies were robbed of Africa to produce wealth for European countries. This is Fort Presenstein, a slave dungeon located in Ambrose's community, Keta.
So we have 38 forting castles in the sub-Saharan Africa. Even though there were more than that, but the major ones used to were about 38. And out of that, 32 in Ghana. This is Fort Presenstein, built by the Danish Norwegians. And most of the enslaved from these forts were shipped to the Caribbean countries. St. Thomas, St. Louis, St. Croix, St. John, Trinidad and Tobago. Even some were sent to South America, Brazil, Cuba. Even some to US, North Carolina, South, and Florida. So that is why up to today, for instance, if you travel to America or Jamaica, anytime the African Americans having a chat with one another, one will be saying Yaman, Yaman. Coincidentally, we have the same word in a Berber language, meaning Yemen. So after the fort was built, slave markets were also established at various points for the supply of enslaved Africans. So we have Badagry slave market in Nigeria, in Benin, Wida, Glepe, Agboma, in Togo, Anejo, Agbadra. Then we have Atoko slave markets. But the name Atoko derived its name from the trade. In those days when the Akans or the Ashantis got their slaves, they channeled those slaves through Ketekrachi, which is one of the major slave routes. So the moment they brought the slaves over there, in exchange with gun and gunpowder, then they said Metoako or Yetoako. So the word was corrupted to become Atoko. So where we are sitting, this is the female section of these forts, where they kept the female slaves. But initially, no ventilations were created. So 100 slaves were kept in each of the cells. Maybe sometimes they were more than that. So the slaves slept there, urinate, defecate, even some of them died due to dehydration. So this is the auction block where the slaves were being sorted out, and after that hot iron were being used to burn the mark on the various parts of their body for easy identification. You know, in the olden days too, there was nothing like a birth certificate. So in order to estimate their age, they look at the state of their teeth. So as the Danish Norwegians lived here for many centuries, some of the words they had in their language were integrated into the Berber language. Today we have what we call gaffer or gaffer. It means fork that they used to eat with. We have saks or sakisi, which means zigzags. We have kakalak, meaning insects or cockroaches. So we have safi, which means key. So you hear the other tribes say safla and so on. So sometimes any word that is similar to the tribes along the coastline, mostly it was a borrowed language from the European. And then when the Europeans were coming, the trade was a barter trade or barter system. So gun were brought, gunpowder, textiles, mirror, liquor, all these items were used in exchange with the slaves. Most of the slaves that died in here, that is why up to today, sometimes at night, their spirits, their noises comes out of this dungeon. So when that happens, so the elders and the chief and the chief of the town will be informed, and the libations will be poured. So those are the bottles that they use for the libation.
You might not believe in ghost stories, but metaphorically speaking, the ghost of slavery still haunts, because people, till this day, continue to suffer the effects of slavery. Africa is one of the most diverse continents one can find. It is divided into countries, and these countries largely fight for themselves, no matter how small, to make it in the world's way of development, where they do not have an equal footing to begin with. The best bet they have is when they are truly united, because even the West does not have a balanced approach in trading with Africa. African nations face the same struggles, exploitation, and unsustainable debt interest rates, yet fail to realize the dire need of coming together as a strong force to thrive. The topic of African unity always brings to mind the Siamese crocodile's Adinkra symbol. This African art in Adinkra symbolism represents the need for unity and harmony in society. This symbol depicts two crocodiles sharing the same stomach. They are bound to one fate, yet they are blind to that fact. The death of one would eventually lead to the death of the other, yet they both struggle to have more of what they both equally need to survive. This emphasizes how interconnected we are as a people. If there is one thing the pandemic has taught us, it is how interconnected we are as a people. That is why we cannot continue to do things as we used to, because when one person is at risk in the world due to social inequality, war, climate change, we are all at risk. It is important for African governments and Western governments to work more effectively and more sustainably together to address this illegal migration challenge, because it affects us all. As the Adinkra symbol implies, we are all connected.
Another day is coming to an end. I have finished the day's work. I am just not happy how the government has neglected us. But we cannot give up. We can only hope for a better day. Let's see what tomorrow will bring.
I was once asked, what is the story of Africa? I could only say, it is a story still being written. The story of Africa is a story of a people traveling,